John,
Angie.
how are your coaching sessions going this week?
Oh, great so far. Thanks for asking. How about you?
Pretty good, though I'm concerned I might not have made the best impression with a new client.
Have they said anything to make you think that's the case?
Well, not so far, but things got a little, I don't know, they got off to a rocky start when we had some challenges coordinating our calendars.
But the client hasn't said anything about this, right?
Not yet, no.
I'm guessing they haven't asked for a refund either.
Thankfully, no, they haven't asked for a refund, but my goal is to gain their respect from the start.
Sure. Should they respect you as a coach?
Well, that's one of our goals as coaches, right?
Yeah, of course, but nobody's perfect, Angie. Sometimes rocky starts lead to great coaching relationships.
Exactly. I needed that. Let's start the show.
Welcome to the Coaching Clinic with John and Angie, the show for professional coaches that explores the ins and outs of coaching, from working with clients through to running and marketing your coaching business.
If you're a professional coach who's committed to your own personal and professional growth, cares about making a difference, and wants to have a successful coaching business, you're in the right place.
My name's John Ball.
And I'm Angela Bezignano.
Between us, we have over 50 years of coaching experience and best practices to share with you. From getting started to scaling up your business.
We know what works and what doesn't, as well as what it really takes to have a successful and thriving coaching business.
With new episodes every Wednesday.
Make sure you're subscribed to get them fresh.
Hey, look, it all starts with mindset, right? How many times have you heard that in your life? It all starts with mindset.
Yeah, I don't think I started to really understand or grasp the whole concept of how mindset affects us as coaches. We're so worried about the mindset of our clients that sometimes we forget about ourselves. We make things up even.
Yeah. I figured today we might be able to touch on both of those things, but primarily wanted to focus on mindset for coaches and how we show up in our coaching sessions and how important that is. And it was something for me that I feel like I left to chance. I've talked before in episodes, in recordings we've done, about how my sort of general feeling about coaching would only ever be as good as my last session. And that was really part of the whole leaving this to chance. Like, how many of us in our lives have set the parameters around what's good and what's not, and then how we should feel according to that, so that we end up making the times that we feel good become very conditional. That we have to tick the certain boxes. We can only feel good in these sorts of times. We only get to feel good about ourselves as coaches when we tick these boxes. That's often what it feels like. And it took me, I think part of it was that the experience of getting past this was partly the experience or just gaining experience, but also partly was working on mindset.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. It is that if we put too much focus on, well, how did each independent session go, and let that dictate how we see ourselves as coaches, we're not going to last as coaches for sure, right? Inevitably, there's going to be sessions that are great, and you have to decide what a great session looks like. And then there's going to be sessions where maybe it's not so great. Maybe there wasn't some titanic breakthrough. So we can't walk away from each of our sessions going, this was good, this was bad, this was good, this was bad. Because we put ourselves on an emotional roller coaster. So what's the healthy mindset for us as coaches so that we can navigate through that? And I had this conversation with somebody just yesterday, and it was a conversation with a friend, and it was, hey, how's everything going? And he said, well, it's like being on a kayak. Now, I don't kayak, so I was like interested. I'm like, what does this even mean? And sometimes the river is flowing and it's great. Sometimes it's really this. And I always used to pray for the calm waters. But what I realized is what I needed was a great paddle and a great helmet. So that kind of resonated with me, even though I'm not a kayaker, because I feel like as coaches, we really do need that. Like, we really need to just be as prepared as we can be for whatever the outcomes are.
Yeah. That metaphor would have worked with me because I love kayaking. But
okay, there you go.
I absolutely would have resonated with that.
I'll introduce you.
Thank you. It's so essential, and it's a big part we miss. A lot of what I talk about in life is And really, this is the heart of personal development as well. Being at cause in our own life rather than being an effect of what's going on around us. And that really is what part of what mindset comes into, because I always now think of it in terms of growth and fixed mindset as well, like Carol Dweck's book, Mindset, great book. But when you understand the difference between a fixed mindset that feels limited and mistakes mean you'll become less than every time, than a growth mindset where mistakes are opportunities for growth instead and everything is expansive, that's a huge difference, and one that I think absolutely we need to work with that with our clients, but often we need to remind ourselves of that as coaches as well. You've probably had this as well, but I've certainly had coaching sessions that I have thought that didn't go well, and maybe probably even had ones where I've actually apologized to a client and said, hey, I don't think that session went very well. So I'm going, what are you talking about? That was great. Absolutely what I needed. I loved it. And it's like, well, we judge things based on our projections a lot of the time. What we thought should be a good session might actually still have been exactly what they needed. I've never really had an incident where, except my very early days as a coach, where someone has come back and that hasn't been a good session and I've had to agree with it.
I'm going to be honest, I haven't had that, although I told you, I think we've talked about this even in earlier episodes. I've had one or two clients that I think were difficult, and because we were getting it right, because we were hitting the right places, they began to feel threatened and scared and wanted to run away. That's been more of my experience. But I think my mindset has not always been in the right place because I have been so focused on delivery, right? I have to be great. I have to make this good. What I really had to do was get out of that space and just allow for the session. Because I think if you go into it with too much emphasis on, I'm really going to extract from them today, or with any kind of expectation, actually, you're really doing a disservice to yourself, to your client, and to the session, and to the overall outcomes that can present, and even in the long term of working with you as a coach. So, but that took practice, right? That really took a lot of practice. And when I think back to my earlier days as a coach, I'm laughing now. I'm thinking to myself, gosh, and I don't think, oh gosh, Angie, you stopped. That wasn't it. But I was not as tuned in, I think, as I am now, as I've trained myself to be, because I was very disconnected and looking too much at, is it good? Is it good? Is it good? Well, what's good? Stop, right? What you think was great might scare the bejesus out of them, right? And what you just said makes all the sense in the world. You're like, hey, let me apologize. And they're like, for what? That was really great. So yeah, the mindset. So let me ask you this then. If they're like, what is the mindset that you now utilize? You're more experienced as a coach. So do you actually set a mind? Do you set yourself up before a session? Or have you just become like this different personality when you're coaching now?
I do feel to a degree that I have my coaching persona. Like this is this is who I am when I'm coaching, and it's a little different, not vastly different. It's not like a completely different alter ego, and I'm certainly not, well, as far as I'm aware, I'm not schizophrenic or anything like that. I don't have multiple personality disorder or anything like that I'm aware of. So we all have slightly different versions of ourselves. We all have that. And so there is a mode that I go into when I'm coaching. And one of the reasons why I'm particularly aware of doing that is because I used to find myself being in coaching mode when I was outside of coaching sessions sometimes, and had to switch it off because it was making me into a bit of an arsehole in certain situations of trying to be a coach when people weren't wanting me to be a coach. No, I learned that very quickly, but it's like sometimes that coaching mode does need to be switched off, or I need to stop analyzing people whilst I'm talking to them as well, because I'm not really having a conversation, I'm analyzing them, which isn't really ideal for being present, for being fully present in that kind of one-to-one personal conversation with a friend. So I do slip into that. It used to be a bit more, I think there was more of an intentionality or rituality about it in earlier days where I had to set my intention for each coaching session, get myself into that mode and place before starting my sessions for the day. That it happens naturally now. So
Yeah.
experienced in it, I just slip into it. So I would compare it to like when I'm speaking on stage. Now, I have my ritual for how I want to feel when I go on stage, and I still do it to some degree, but even if I don't do it, it's still automatically programmed into my brain now of like how I show up on stage and how I am. It's a similar kind of thing.
I think it's important I'm going to pause you there because I think it's important for everybody who's listening to understand that it is part, like what I said about who I was in the beginning versus now, right? Because I hadn't figured out who I was yet as a coach. I had the skills, I had the tools even, but I wasn't quite there. So what you're speaking to is I know who I am now, and I love things that I can just slip into it. And I think that's what people need to realize is it is going to take practice. And I'm going to be honest, there were times where I thought I was delivering. I can look back now and think of specific clients in the very beginning where I was literally just coaching them back before I was an actual coach, and I'm air quoting right now, right? I was a trainer, and it felt very different, but it wasn't, right? Different persona there. But so when I started coaching and I was acting more like a trainer, I thought I was doing a great job, but I wasn't doing a great job, right? Because it is a little bit of a different dynamic and an energy that you bring. But I love how you identified that. So there is the idea that you as a coach, you have to identify who it is you want to be as a coach, right? And be that persona. And it's going to take practice. And it's not something that I think you can just say, well, I want to be this kind of a coach and then I'm going to be it. I think it starts to come, you learn that about yourself as you are experiencing more diverse people, right? Clients, and doing more sessions, because I am certainly not, as a coach now, who I thought I was going to be. If I created a vision of Coach Angie in the future, what did she look like? She didn't look like who I actually am. And that's not a bad thing. It's a great thing. So I have to laugh too. I have to point to this. Yes, I too had to step out of, let me save every person in every conversation. But that was also part of, because of who I was, it was just naturally coming to me that I wanted to be a coach. You and I had a conversation, a week or two ago? You were coaching me, right? You weren't just being like, well, as a friend, let me ask you. There was an absolute shift where I felt it, where you started to coach me. So it's good that we're able to do that almost. And if I wasn't trained as a coach, I wouldn't have realized that you went into coach mode. So that tells me, hey, by the way, John's a really good coach. I'm just telling you. He's good at that.
But also, because I remember that conversation very well, I was testing the water to make sure that was okay before I did go into that coach mode. So even though I didn't outright say that, I was like just testing out, is this where you want me to go? And we did.
Yeah. So I think and I think it's important, right? And just to remember that when you first start out, you don't know who you are yet. And even if you've been doing it for a while, what would you say to coaches I want to say this. I think a lot of people prepare for sessions. I think I've heard a lot of coaches, if I ask them, what are you doing in a day? They'll say, well, I have to prepare for my sessions. And I say, well, how do you prepare? And they're mostly doing like energy work. They're mostly like breathing, or they're doing something that's a physical and a little bit of a mental, like clearing. Sure. Okay, that's great. But then what? How are you preparing for your session? So like, how do you slip in, right? What would you say to people who have been doing it for a while to check in on their mindset? What would you say to them?
I think it really only needs to be as simple as raising a little bit of conscious awareness around how you're feeling right now, what's going on for you. Am I in the right mindset? Is this how I want to be showing up for my coaching call? How am I showing up? How did I show up on my last call? Did I show up in the way that I wanted to? Is that how I want to be seen as a coach? Is that who I would want to be coached by, and the way that I would want to be coached myself? So I think there are just questions you can ask yourself for clarity and for a little bit of conscious awareness around that can start to bring that up. Because one of the things I was thinking about was like whether there was maybe a kind of perfect coaching mindset. I don't think there's one. I think there's probably a number of them, but there probably are mindset elements that are relevant to most, if not all of them. And we've often talked about being really present in calls as well, but this is about being present with yourself as well, to understand how you are showing up and what you are putting out there energetically. There are coaches who are a bit wham bam, thank you ma'am.
Well, listen, you definitely feel like you're on an assembly line. I've been coached by people, and I've observed coaches who are very, I don't even know, like they're connected but disconnected. And if that client hasn't had previous experience with a coach, that might be fine. But then when they experience somebody like me, right, or you, where it isn't a wham bam, it isn't a here, you're on a conveyor belt, you're on an assembly line, next. Eventually people get to know that. And that's what I just write down the word because I didn't want to forget while you were speaking that although this isn't exactly about mindset, it is, and essentially it is that you have to be consistent in how you show up every time you speak with a client. I learned that only a few years ago, actually. Not that I learned it, I would say, but I had an awareness moment because I had just suffered a family loss. There was a death in the family like the day before. And I thought, well, I can do my sessions. It'll be okay. And when I got on the call with my first client of the day, he was like, Angie, as soon as I said, hey, so-and-so, how are you today? And went through the quick, Angie, I'm sorry. Is everything okay? You don't sound like yourself. And I was like, oh, crap. I was like, no, actually, I feel fine. Like I realized I wasn't bringing it. I know it's not exactly what we're talking about, but when you talk about that, because your clients are going to get to know you as the persona, right? So if you're not being consistent, if you can't bring the same energy in session 6 that you were bringing in session 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you probably need to check yourself, right? So that I know that's a little left of where we're going, but
no, I get where you're going with that. But I'll let you finish your thought.
No, it was just simply that's the start. That's the starting for me. The piece for my mindset is where am I, right? It's not just the overview of who I think I am as a coach. I don't allow the outcomes of my sessions to dictate who I think I am as a coach or what value I bring as a coach. I disallow that because that, again, is going to create a roller coaster. And it's most of the time, it's not really even true.
You have to take the bigger picture approach.
Yeah.
But I will just say this as an aside, and this is certainly for people who do group coaching, don't have your mobile on display where you can see it whilst you're on a coaching call. And I say this from personal experience. I was partway through a group coaching call one time when I got a text message that my grandfather had died. And it's okay, we weren't that close, stuff like that, but it still shook me. And it distracted me enough from the call that it was like, well, I was able to carry on and deliver, but it was just like, I wish I hadn't seen that message until after the call. Seeing it 30 minutes later would not have made any difference to the outcome or to me. But just sometimes allowing ourselves to be, I'm not saying that's the messages that are going to pop up for you, but it's just for things that help us to be present and stay in the right mindset. There are things that can easily take you out of being present and take you out of being in the right mindset to conduct your coaching calls.
Right. Yeah.
I agree. If I think about optimal mindset for a coach, I do think we should be in growth mindset ourselves. And we should be able to be expansive because we need to have that view for the clients as well. If we're taking the bigger picture in with them overall, because we're not just viewing them session by session, slice by slice, we're taking the bigger picture. We should do that with our view on our sessions with them as well. It's not just slice by slice; it's the whole sessions the whole time that you get to work together with them is the journey of transformation. So if there was something you missed or something you fluffed or something you didn't say as well as you want to, guess what? You've got another shot at it on your next session.
Yeah, I think that's the growth mindset for me in that space is, I think I've said this in other times we've spoken. I've said that I will assess myself on the daily. I will assess myself at the end of the week and say, which was my greatest session this week? And why do I think it was the greatest session? Because honestly, that's my opinion. And it may not be the opinion of the clients. However, I still need to self-assess no matter how much I can slip into the persona and just coach. I could coach on a dime at this point, but I still need to keep myself, what's the word I'm looking for? I need to keep myself accountable. And that's how I stay in growth. Besides reading books, besides attending spaces where I can go learn some new technique or something, I'm always doing that. But I feel like that my real growth comes from me being able to be objective and be able to look and say, okay, so what could I have done even better? No matter how good it is, no matter how great the session has been or the experience with a specific client, it's, well, what could be better then? What could I expand on, right? If something works, let's expand on it. What isn't really working? I've had to adjust myself. I've had to eliminate certain even topics from my sessions because they're just not really helpful. And I'm seeing a theme. And again, that doesn't mean we're getting it wrong. It's part of being in, for me, that growth mindset of I need to expand as a coach. Otherwise, people are going to get sick of hearing the same things over and over.
For our listener who's maybe earlier on in their coaching journey or maybe even just getting ready to move into this area, there are always going to be situations, even later on in your coaching career, where there will be coaches who you feel are better than you or coaches who have more knowledge than you. But that's not really the case necessarily that they are better or more knowledgeable. They will have different experience, different strengths, different knowledge bases to pull from. That doesn't invalidate what you do or who you are, unless you choose to let it do so. It's often said comparison is the thief of joy, right? It's also the thief of confidence to a great degree with coaches particularly, that if we are comparing ourselves to people who are at the top of the game, or maybe they've just really dialed in their message and marketing so ideally that they're rising up to the top, they've become famous for what they're doing perhaps, they've taken a different approach to you. Doesn't mean you couldn't have that necessarily. It just means this is different. You shouldn't still undervalue your coaching. But if you haven't progressed in your learning from what you very first learned on your first coaching program or your first coaching book or however you got started here, then there is something to address there, because we should always not just be in a growth mindset, but actively growing as well in terms of our learning and what's available. If someone teaches or someone's using a framework that we haven't come across before, we just did a whole episode on frameworks. Someone's created a framework, you think that's really powerful, that could be really useful to me. Might not be what you base your whole coaching on, but it could be an advantageous tool to have in your coaching arsenal. Great, go and learn that framework. But if you think that your coaching is not enough because you don't have that, you are undervaluing yourself, and you are perhaps in a fixed mindset. Then you're thinking, well, my coaching isn't as good as that, or my coaching isn't enough. The reality is, I think, to me anyway, if you can make a difference with the people you work with and help them get to where they want to get to and deal with some of the stuff that they're dealing with on the way, you have a lot of value to give. Your coaching is valuable to the people who you're working with.
Yeah, I think that what you're saying is absolutely true. And I think that what I would add on to that is that you cannot, as a coach, look for a grade, like a specific finite, I would give myself a 5 out of 10 on this. I really think that if you are in a growth mindset, you take that pressure away from yourself and you give yourself the opportunity to just do and be better the next time. and be honest. Don't overly pat yourself on the back and say, gosh, I'm the queen. I did that. I rocked that session. Okay. Not that you don't do that. If you have if you ever have a difficult, I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to BS people. If I have a difficult client and they are really, you know, it's like pulling teeth with them, and then finally there's that submission and they finally let it out or let it happen, I'm like hanging up the phone or turning off the Zoom or walking out of the room, whatever, and going, yes, finally. Right. And I don't necessarily go, well, you did that, Angie. What a great job you did. I don't grade myself like that. I'm just happy that it happened. And then I might go back and say, was there anything I did differently today? Or has it been, sometimes you just don't know. Sometimes you just don't know like what the thing is that you said or did that lets it happen for a client.
True.
And with that being said, you therefore can't judge it based on your outcomes with them, based on anything specific, except just saying, you know what? It worked today. Now, where do I go? Now that we've opened up this gate, now what can be next with this client? That's really what keeps you away from that grading system. I don't go for that.
You, in reality, you don't always know the impact that you make with your clients in the sessions, especially if you do group coaching and group training. I have had clients come back to me years later to say that there was a big impact shift and that wanting to work with me one-on-one because they did group coaching or training with me years ago. That has happened to me so many times.
Yeah.
And I may not even remember them because I've worked with I've literally worked with hundreds and thousands of people from across the world. I don't always remember anyone. And people I've worked with one-on-one, definitely more so, although I'm over 50 now. My recall for people isn't what it used to be.
Truth. Hashtag truth.
Here's a question for you, though. Do you have a mental image of who you like, you as the ultimate version of you, how you're showing up as Angie 2.0, as Super Coach Angie? Do you have that in mind?
I don't think that I do. No. You know what? I think that I'm being honest. Like the answer to that is no. But it's not because I think there's no goal set around that. I think I look at it in the smaller steps all the time. I stopped doing that. I think for me, I just look at it and say, am I giving the best? Am I as prepared as I can be? Am I giving the best to each client and each session with that client, with those clients, and still delivering the value, right? So no, like I don't know. I don't think at this point, if you said to me, what would be your goal as a coach next year? Personally, right? Not gaining more clients or,
Do you think you would have had that earlier on in your coaching? Because I think I did earlier on, maybe just had images of people who I really looked up to as coaches that I wanted to be more like.
It's interesting because I'm going into the weeds. Get ready. But when I thought about when I became an actual coach, I was looking at speakers. I attended a Tony Robbins. I attended a Connie Podesta. These were people that were influential for me. And I really was more in looking into that space. I imagined myself on the stage as a speaker, but I never imagined myself in that higher place as the coach and what that would look like. So it's funny that you bring that up because the answer is the same now because you're asking as it was back then. Yeah, that one's a little bit tough for me because I don't have a vision of what the next would be for me in coaching.
Let me ask you this then. Are there coaches you know of who you would at least like to be a bit more like them? And if not, like you don't want to be single white female kind of thing, but there are aspects of who they are or how they show up or what they do that you think, I would like to be able to do that, or I'd like to be more like that.
So the honest answer is the people that I've experienced, and I think I've had to be careful, right? If I see somebody and that's a bigger name that is a coach, and I watch little blips and blurbs of them talking on like social media and whatever, I definitely love the energy of sometimes of the people who can just say it the way that it is. And what I had to be mindful of is that I couldn't just take that and put that into my own coaching, because those people have earned their wings already. And I don't necessarily have that street cred yet, if you
Yeah.
will. So I've had to be careful of that. I'm actually having some again, but I think all the people that were coaches that turned speaker, that's how I see them now. So yeah, I think it's just, I think the thing that attracts me to any coach is the ability of that coach to just call it out, say it the way that it is. And I think me, right? Oh, you're the tough coach and all of that. But I'm also a very loving and compassionate coach, right? I'm not just somebody who's get over it. This isn't like the military. But I do aspire to be able to be even more real with people, like calling it out real.
Yeah. I certainly have some coaches who I respect greatly. And there are aspects of them that I would like to be, or that I would strive to be more like, or try to.
Well, I'm so curious because I'm
Try
like,
to-
I'm struggling to answer the question because everybody that I know that's a coach is also a speaker. So I'm always looking at them as the speaker, right? So
See.
who? Yeah.
Same. And I do want to do an episode on coaching and speaking at some point as well, because I think it'll be an interesting chat. One is a lady called Carrie Wilkerson. She is an amazing speaker, but she's also a really awesome coach. And I don't think she does huge amounts of one-to-one. I did have the privilege of being in group coaching with her for a while. And she's just an incredibly good coach. She's motivational, she's warm, she's uplifting. She has that mama bear kind of approach to coaching. And she's very good at saying what needs to be said in that motherly, caring way that get off your butt and do it. So yeah, I love that. I love that whole style of it, and certainly aim to be a little more like that in stuff that I do. But I'm never going to be Carrie. Carrie's Carrie. Fuck me.
But you don't want to be Carrie, right? You
No, I
want
don't
to
want
be
to
John
be her.
Paul, right?
I don't want to be her. I just recognize that there are aspects of who she is and how she shows up that I want to emulate and be more like. And I think that she probably has had people like that in her journey as well. I know she worked with Bob Proctor for a long time as well. And I think also, I'm saying Bob Proctor, and I think it was actually Zig Ziglar who she worked with. Zig Ziglar.
Okay.
So she was well grounded in the industry and with great mentors as well. And I think that's a huge part of it. But what she makes me think of, and probably other people who I do look up to as coaches, and it's just a handful. Honestly, it's just a handful of people. But how they show up energetically is so important. The energy that they come onto their calls with, the feeling that you get when you're around them. And that can only really happen if they're intentional about that. And if this is who they're choosing to show up with, they're not leaving it to chance. They are deciding that they have their coaching persona, the coaching style, and know who they want to show up as and how they want to be with people. So I think your points about the questions, the reflecting on how you've been showing up and what you've been doing, and that's really the only way you can pick up on that and grow for the future.
I think that something you just said like opened a door for me. When I think about my past experiences as a coach and what value because I always ask, what did you value? Either about a session or the entire journey. The thing that people say about me each and every time is that I really connect to them as a human, right? Because I think that some people that are new to having a coach, or maybe they've had a business coach before, when they come into coaching with me, the thing that they experience is that there's nothing really magical about it, right? It feels almost conversational, and it doesn't feel threatening, and it doesn't feel like all of a sudden they're like, what is this wizardry that you're bringing into the session? And it creates a sense of calm. It creates a sense of wanting to be vulnerable and truthful. So that's the energy space. And I think that is myself, like what I'm drawn to. I don't love watching people. I've been trained by people that are all about creating the illusion, and I'm not about creating illusion, not one bit. I'm about creating a reality, and that I think is the difference. Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like I'm
Yeah.
not looking for some topical answer.
I love what you just said. I think this is the sort of point where we'll wrap this up. But I think it's so powerful to ask yourself these questions, be intentional about how you're showing up, and be able to start creating more of a consistency about how that is. Get the
Yeah.
feedback from your clients, get your own feedback on yourself as well. Take time to think and reflect on things, because it is that combination that's going to help you develop it and grow in those sorts of ways. And maybe have a look at the people who you do maybe are ahead of you on the journey, or people who you look up to as coaches, and what are their sort of qualities or the ways they show up that you can learn from and maybe even embody to some degree in your practices. But I think it's all powerful things. Love to hear about any other thoughts that you may have on mindset. You can reach out to us on LinkedIn. You'll always find us there. You can leave us a voicemail at speakpipe.com/the coaching clinic podcast. And we would love to hear from you, even if you have rude things to say to us, or especially if you have rude things to say to us. and we might just feature you on the show. But in the meantime, thanks for listening in, and we'll be back next week with more good stuff from the coaching clinic.
Bye for now.